I guess you can see my screen now. Okay. So we discussed about temp tables, how we create temp tables, and what is the scope of temporary table, and how we do actions on it and all. And we discussed about table variables. And the other part we should discuss about is that cursor. So it is one thing that it is almost same as like the above two. All these three will serve the same purpose to maintain like a placeholder to maintain the data for temporary purposes, like to process or to hold for like other processing stuff and all. So so what actually is cursor is it's a temporary placeholder while we execute our stored procedure. So whenever we want to store some data to process something on, we will just create a this cursor, and we fetch the records from the cursor, and then we close it, and then we deallocate it. So it could be like something like life cycle of a cursor, you can say it. So first we declare the cursor, and then we will open the cursor. Um, let's say we'll declare first the cursor, and then we'll open, and then we fetch the records, fetch the contained records, and then we'll check for if the cursor is empty or not. We'll check if the cursor is empty or not. If it is empty, we'll go forward for closing the cursor. If it is not empty, we'll go to fetch again. So if it is empty, we'll close the cursor, and we'll deallocate from the memory. So this is basic life cycle of a basic cursor. So how do we declare a cursor? So let's say it is just that with the declare keyword and followed by the object. The way we usually create or declare our variables, say we will declare our variables as like var and int. So this is how we declare a variable with the type of integer. So same way we should be declaring the cursor. Let's say cursor underscore example ex, which is of object type cursor. So with this and followed by first statement for like number of select statements. So this is how we declare a cursor. Okay. And when we want to, so the declaration part is over now. And when we want to open the cursor, we just go with open keyword, and that is open. And the name of the cursor is cursor example, cursor underscore ex. And to fetch the data from the cursor, we use fetch next command. This is the one. Fetch next from next is to mention that next record from the cursor. From is to mention the object. We'll do this cursor example, and then we will be selecting this into some variables. So if we are selecting the complete row of a row from a cursor, we will be inserting into table variable. So this is if that is not the case, we will be just selecting into some variables. So we declared our cursor with the declare keyword and for declare for, and we will open our cursor to get the details or to get to fetch the details from it, and fetches to actually fetch the details. And like we continue to fetch details with help of like one of our system variables. So that is called fetch status. So whenever we perform a fetch operation, there is one particular key system variable called @ fetch status. So this will contain the status of the fetched records. So if it is like if this first status is 0, the operation is successful. So that is how we go for it. And for the next fetch, if the data is there, it will return 0. So on, so on, so it will go on. And we discussed about while statement, if you remember. So previously, while we are discussing control flow statements, we discussed about while as well. So in that way, we can check if it has like multiple records or not. So if I say while fetch status is 0, that means this particular fetch operation is being completed successfully. And then I would do next fetch. So that means that same syntax. Fetch next into some again variables. Okay. So for the while syntax, we do have begin and end. While begin, and we end the while as well. And then we close the cursor. Open cursor ex. So that is just the name I've taken. Okay. So this is just a name, cursor ex. I just mentioned for example, cursor example. Are we good now? Close the cursor and deallocate the cursor. So this is how we perform operations, or we create a cursor, and however operations that we are going to do, like we usually fetch into some variables and do some operations on it. So this is how the basic the concept of cursors work. Let us try an example. So we have like our plenty of other tables in the other databases, but we have only the employee tables, the employee table available in our database now. Let's see how we can get that particular cursors, employee details from a cursor. So for that, I'd like to create a cursor first. For that, what I should be doing? So declare cursor name C_emp. I will make it just for the simplicity case, and it is of type cursor. And for I should be mentioning the whatever the select data that I should be getting from any of the tables. For that, I'd like to go for this we mentioned as above, select statement, select what else we have in our employee table. I completely forgot. Sorry, this is the database of master we should have. So we have ID, name, age, and salary. I would like to get ID and name. So for that, I don't want this anymore. For select ID, command name from table employee. Okay. With this, we can actually create a. I mean, this is more than enough to create a cursor. We just declare the variable and we give it for. I mean, we give it with the first for keyword to mention the required number of columns that are to be taken out from the tables that are available in the databases. So, and then we discussed about like creating a temporary variables to hold the data. For that, we just create for temporary variables. That is, I would like to create ID and employee. Sorry, ID and the name from for employee ID. So I would like to create EID. So that would be with @ symbol, which is a print. And again, declare address symbol E name, which is a var again. I would like to take it for some 20 characters. So with this particular, till here we got completed. Sorry, till here. Declaring the cursor and temporary variables to hold the data for the cluster. And then we have to open the cursor to get our details into. So for that, we just give open and followed by our cursor name. This is CEMP. Open cursor name. And then we use fetch command. Fetch next into, fetch next from cursor name. Okay. Into @EID, comma, @ename. So this is where I'm mentioning open my cursor and then fetch cursors columns ID and name into EID and ename variables. Okay, are we clear so far? And then we'll close the cursor. And then we deallocate the cursor. Let's execute all together. So it says command completed successfully, but we did not print anywhere. So that is why it says just the commands completed successfully, but the variables have the data associated with them. And to print that or to get like then all the I had my like 2 to 3 records in my table. So to get that, I'd like to go with another level, which is the fetch count. Sorry, the fetch status that is that we discussed here. So same one. I'd like to say while fetch status is equals to 0, I'd like to begin while and end, and in between that, I'd like to print my variables. So I use print command to actually print my product name. The employee name and ID. So print @ID and followed by let's concatenate with something. So SQL supports only a single quotation marks. id colon space, and let's concatenate that with place, and then name as in from the variable ename. Is that it? It is eid and ename the variables, and then we fetch again. So are we clear so far? So what I did is that this particular statement fetches the data from cursor. If it is successfully getting the data from the cursor, this fetch status will be 0. And that time I'm entering into the cursor, I'm entering into the while loop, which I mentioned to display my ID and name, which I fetched from the cursor. And then I'm trying to fetch the next record. So next levels of data. So again, this will fetch into EID and ename. Again, this will execute it, and then again it will come and display my names and my name stuff. And it tries to get the third record, which I don't have in my table. So at that moment, what it says that this particular statement will fail, and the fetch status will be set to non-zero value. So that states that our fetch operations has been completed. And then the while condition is getting false, and then we come out of the loop and we close the cursor and deallocate it. Let's execute this. Okay, conversion failed when converting varchar value id to data type int. So we should be doing some typecasting here. I don't want to take that now. I just remove this. And let's try executing it. And I'll remove this as well. Let's get rid of all the typecasting errors. It says again, the value cannot be converted to, then we go with cast only. Where are we? Print. We use cast function. I think I did not discuss this. Cast thread id as varchar, and then let's print it. So this function I did not discuss, I guess. Is it so? Like, if you find anywhere that the things that I did not discuss anywhere so far, please keep a note. The next 2 to 3 sessions will be completely miscellaneous things. So this says 1A and 2B. Let's do that in a proper way. Anyhow, we did typecasting. So let's say id colon cast, and then again concatenate with something called name colon. It says ID is 1, name is A. ID is 2, name is B. This is how many number of records you can have. That is up to like the table's content, and we can give some where conditions like while creating the fetcher. So here I can give some where condition as well while selecting the data into my cursor. So that's how you can kind of reduce the data in the data flow into the cursor. So this is one particular type of entity that we gonna use inside the stored procedures as well. So whenever you get a situation like to store some data into some variables, or like to store bunch of records, then we will be using this particular concept called cursors. So you can use any of the things such as table variables and temporary tables and as well as cursors. So all it matters is scope and the availability of the cursor. The availability of the cursor will be only till the end of the procedure that in which you have defined this cursor. So if it is coming for the what you call temporary table, that will be deallocated only when the connection's been lost. I mean, the connection's been closed, the creator's connection been lost. So that is about the cursors and temporary tables. We now proceed to triggers. So what is a trigger? Trigger is like a kind of it's also a stored procedure, kind of stored procedure, but not completely a stored procedure. But when we have to execute stored procedure, we have to call it explicitly. But the cursor is the one is almost like stored procedure, but we don't need to call it explicitly to execute the set of statements. So this will be triggered automatically. Like if you consider on the table, we have DML triggers. So that is like, that says that whenever DML operation, data manipulation language operations, such as insert, delete, or update, happens on a particular table, then that particular trigger will get triggered. And the statements associated within that particular trigger will get executed with ease, you can say. So for that, to summarize this, trigger is also a stored procedure, but we don't need to call it explicitly. It will get called or triggered when there is a particular defined operation being performed on a table. So are we clear on that? We can create triggers on like data definition language as well while we create tables or anything as such. And we can create called DML triggers. That is when the DML operation is being performed on the table, and we can create on the logons as well. So whenever user logs in to the SQL Server sessions, so then also we can, at that moment also we can create a trigger to log the information, log the user information to some particular tables. So here we'll look at how to create a trigger and how to like get out of it. So for that, usually the first thing that we go for is create trigger. So create is this create command, and the trigger is the the object type, and followed by object name, the trigger name. So I would say employee trigger. So for cursor, I take as C underscore cursor. For trigger, I'm going to take T underscore EMP. So I'd like to create a trigger on employee table on insert or on delete or on update or whatever operations I do on temporary table, the employee table, I'd like to execute some procedure on it. So for that, I would like to say that create trigger name, create trigger name on table employee. So till here, the syntax will be same on all go. So after is the one command that we mentioned to execute after the particular DML operations being performed. So let's say insert or update or delete. So if I say after and insert, so whenever there is a particular row being inserted into employee table, this particular will get triggered. If I say after updating some value to the employee table, this particular trigger will get triggered. Same as for delete as well. So whenever there is a data being deleted, this trigger will get called. For now, we'll just look at insert operation. When there is a insertion operation being performed on employee table, we'll trigger this. And then we go as keyword and then set of statements are in here. So this is a basic syntax for creating trigger on any of the tables that are available in our database management system. So let's create on our table itself, on our employee table. So I'd like to create one more table called EMP2. Just to that mention, it is a log. Employee log. Whenever there is an employee being inserted or whatever the operations being performed on employee table, we'll insert that into this particular table as well. So create table name is EMP2 as ID being int and name being varchar of some 20. And I guess I don't need much of things to demonstrate. So let's create this. So it says tables created successfully. Let's execute and see what is the data associated with it. It has nothing. This is the particular table EMP2 that has no data in it. And let's try creating with trigger as so this is my trigger definition. I'm just creating a basic trigger which actually copies that inserted data into the new employee table. Okay, so there is one particular object called inserted. Whenever we are doing this particular operations kind of things on the trigger, so select employee ID and name. We wanted that self ID, name from inserted. What it says? Invalid object name EMP2. No issues on that. We just created EMP2 table here. And let's execute this with this statement. It says commands completed successfully. What I did here is to get details, like whenever we do some insertion operation. Just a moment, guys. So whenever I just do an insert operation on employee table, that particular details will also get inserted into EMP2 table as well. So this is what my trigger does. So when there is particular insert operations being performed on my table, I'd like to just do some operations. For that, with the demonstration, I'm inserting into the EMP2 table. from the object called inserted. This is the inserted, which is actually system defined entity, which actually stores the whatever inserted data corresponding to, associated with this particular trigger. And we have one more entity in the same way, that is deleted. So whenever you are doing on delete, if you want to log it to somewhere or to backup into some other table, you can do this as well from the deleted object. So here I'm just going on the inserted. So I have executed this and it's completed successfully. And let's now try inserting into employee table. Inserting to employee. Employee ID is unique and auto incremented value, so I don't need to give the value. So the name is C, and his salary is that we have. Okay, age and the salary. Age is some 21 and the salary is some 5,000 gigs. Let me try to execute this. Before that, I'd like to show this particular table's data. So it should be having nothing. So the employee 2 table has nothing and employee table has 2 records. And I'd like to insert one record into employee table. See what it happens. Executed. It says one row affected for 2 times. That is because our particular trigger got triggered and the particular statements what I mentioned in here, those got executed. Let's go and see what is the data in EMP table, sorry, employee table. Let's execute this. It has 3C, 21 and 5,000. And let's go and see in EMP2 table as well. Execute. It says 3 and C. I did not do any specific operations to insert into EMP2 table, but all I did was created a trigger on employee table, which takes data from insertion operation and inserts into EMP2 table. So that's what the basic trigger and how we can create triggers. When we are planning, this is a basic DML trigger that we perform. So instead of insert, we can create update. We can have update also. We can have delete also. So this is a DML trigger. So when we want to create DDL trigger, when we create some some table or anything as such, what we should be doing is that we can create on database level as well. See here, we created on table, create trigger name on employee table. Instead of this employee, we will give master only. So that way we can actually create a trigger on database. Let me give you an example. I guess I did not put it anywhere. Okay. Let's try creating one. So before that, I'd like to have one log table. So we should be having like a, just give me a minute. We should be having knowledge about the way the event data and all works. That is pretty much advanced one. Okay, this is a, we'll replicate this. So create trigger name, we'll say t_create, and these are particular operations that for index creations and index whatever operations like creating indexes or dropping or modifying whatever we do on indexes, this particular trigger will get triggered and inserts into this particular table, which is called the logs table. వివరణ చేస్తున్నాను మీకు బయట రాజు కూర్చున్నది అదే. Okay, no problem. So where was I? Okay, so this is a particular trigger which actually triggers on operations on the indexes and inserts into this small table called index logs. So this particular insert statement that we can give anything that we want. We can even give our own defined tables. This is actually our defined table, and so this is how DTL triggers work as well. And I'm gonna put this to your practice. I mean, with the SQL file I share. So after that, there are certain things that you should be knowing while working with triggers. That are how to get the definition out of the trigger, like to get the definition of the trigger, like just we saw as stored procedures. And how do we disable triggers and how do we enable triggers, those things. So we have created a particular trigger called e-trigger, and it is now in a state called enable. And I want to disable that particular trigger on my employee table. So for that, I have this keyword, this particular command called disable trigger, and trigger name. What we have, our trigger name. This is cursors. Okay, t_emp is the trigger name on table employee. So we just mentioned that disable trigger, that is the command, and followed by trigger name and followed by on keyword to mention on which object it should be like disabled. That is of employee trigger, employee table. So let's try executing this. It's command completed successfully. Now, if I insert anything into my employee table, it should not insert anything into EMP table. So let me try inserting it. Inserting to employee table. Values followed by name, age, and salary. So name should be D. and followed by it should be 18 or 19, and salary should be like, this is money, let's say 1,000. I'm gonna insert into this. So it's one row affected, and I should have the details in employee table. Let me execute this. It says 14, age 19, and 1,000 weeks salary, but I should not have this record in EMP2 table. See, we don't have it. So this is how we disable trigger. What if we want to enable trigger on this particular table? So that is again same command, just that instead of disable, we say enable. Enable trigger, trigger name on the employee, on the table name, employee. Let's execute this. It says command completed successfully. And I'd like to enter the data, insert the data into employee table with the name called employee name E, and his age should be like 20. And let's say he has salary of 2,000. Let me execute this. It says one row affected 2 times. That means it is being inserted into 2 tables. See here, fifth one, E and 2,000, which is of 20 age we inserted in here. And let's see EMP2 table as well. It has 5 and E available for us. So this is how we can disable or enable triggers. And what else we are left with on the triggers? Viewing the definition of the trigger. And how do we list all the triggers and available in the SQL server? And how do we drop the triggers? So we seen multiple times in the, how to see the stored procedure and how to see its definition and also. So same way we are going to see these things, but it will go under programmability, I guess. Okay, before that, I'd like to give you one command that actually can get the trigger names, like listing all the triggers that are available in the SQL server. So that is with the table called sys.triggers. So we have one table called system.triggers. This is a system table. Whenever we create a particular trigger, it will go on inserted into this. See, we have only one trigger that is available. That means this master database has only one trigger available, which is name is t_emp, and its object ID and the other details as well. So this is how we list all the triggers that are available on our SQL server. And if you want to get definition of it, so what we should be doing is that we can get the details from what do you call it, the SQL modules table. So this is the particular table, system.sql modules, which has like all the definitions for all our objects. So here it has like multiple things available for us, in which one of the things is that our trigger name as well. So you can just copy this and paste it onto your work window. See, this is what we exactly created. We should be deleted this one just because I mentioned the comment that it went into SQL injection attack side. So this is how we can get all the definitions from SQL modules as well. So here with template, the object name also we can get like definition from the table and where object ID is or object ID. So that gives us the details of our what do you call the trigger. And if you have any other ways. Yes, we do have it, like the one I was saying. Let's go on to the tables and see our table has it. So here we have our table and let's double click on that table. It has columns, keys, constraints, and as well as the triggers available for that particular table. So clicking on this particular T underscore EMP or the trigger that we created. So these are like multiple options available. Instead of going on with disable trigger command, you can just disable from here as well. And if you want to just modify this, it's all available in here. Just go on right click and modify. So what it says is alter trigger name. So same as alter command for all of our objects. And what else we have? So we are left with, I think, removing the triggers. So for that, we say drop command, like we are very much used to drop trigger name, T underscore EMP. So this particular command should delete the trigger available in our tables, on our tables actually. So it says command completed successfully. And let us see if it is available in here again. Let me select employee and refresh it. Let's go on to the triggers. It has nothing available in this. So this is how the way we work with triggers and the other options associated with triggers. So far, any doubts, guys? If you don't understand or anything, just give it straight messages. So